Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is episode 235 of CryptoBiography, and it is part 4 of the Isle of Bronze. And this is like the big moment. The group from Thebes has come to the island, and they are going to be meeting the king today, so I hope you enjoy it. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And here we go. He went back to his chambers. Mawaya was resting on her most comfortable couch and watched him come in. Her attendants had been dismissed. "And how are you?" he asked, sitting on the edge of her couch and leaning over to give her a kiss. "I will be better when this meeting is over," she said. "Because you worry," he offered. "Because the seat in the reception hall is uncomfortable," she said, though she grinned as she said it. "But yes, I worry. We met the Thebans 3 months ago, if memory serves." "It does." "They have some agenda, then?" "I presume so. I've been unable to determine what it might be." "It won't be good for us, then," she predicted. "If it was, they would announce it beforehand instead of springing it on us." She had put into words something he had only been circling around in his head. "I believe you are right. We will learn it together and face it together. Your people are lucky to have a leader like you." "I would not be half the leader I am without you, even if some would never acknowledge it." "I don't care who acknowledges it, except you." He kissed her again. "Water?" "Please." He went and poured 2 cups of water from the pitcher across the room near his desk. He brought them back, and they drank for a while in silence. "I've invited Shugo to this event." She looked across the room and out the window, thinking. Yes, it is time. When it's over, I will go over it with him, see what he saw, and what conclusions he drew from it. She nodded. "I've already been going over the histories with him, seeing what lessons he can draw from them. This is the next step up. He will do well." It was not a statement of belief, but of settled fact. She draped her arm around his shoulder and rested her head on his chest as her only reply. They rested as well as they could, though both had thoughts running through their heads like summer storms on the sea. A messenger came, and from the door gave the news that the emissary had disembarked and made it to the Bronze Gate. The gate's watch had signaled with their beacons that there were 14 in the party. With that knowledge, they knew that Hermocrates and his party would be arriving in half an hour or so. The number was another surprise. There had been 10 in his party before. Hermocrates, his scribe, 4 stout slaves which carried his baggage and some gifts, and 4 guards. The guards were for appearance's sake, as they were not enemies, and if something had been tried, 4 guards would not have made a difference here in his own hall. This he remembered from his notes, which he had so recently perused, so he was sure of the facts. 14, so 4 more than last time. He thought about what that could mean, but didn't make much headway. Hermocrates and his scribe, surely. Very likely 4 baggage carriers. That left 8. 8 guards. What would be the point? Foreign powers weren't allowed to have armed allies in the reception area where he would meet them. 8 was no more of a brag than 4. So probably 4 guards again, and 4 others. Who they were, he would know soon enough, assuming they were brought into the reception hall. Last time all the Thebans had been, but there had been meetings with other emissaries from other places who left some people outside the meeting. There had been stability on the island for centuries, an oasis of calm while the world had roiled around them. Because of this, as king, he had learned to have control at all times. He didn't like surprises, and this was eating at him. Eventually, Mersili came to the door and was let in. "It is time," he said to Nasramin. "Has there been any additional news?" Nasramin asked. "I am sorry, my king, but no. There may be some later, but it seems none of my people are with them this time. I've seen them approach. It seems they have some additional gifts to give, if the extra chests they carry are any indication. Thank you, friend. Go to the reception hall. We'll be there soon. Yes, sire. Mursili bowed and exited. Let us go, my light, Nasramin said, rising and helping Mawaya up so she could get into her chair. Need anything before we go? He asked. No, love, she said. Let us see what these Thebans would have of you, of us, or of our island. He wheeled her out, and their guards fell in behind them. They went to a special room that was behind the reception hall. It was well protected, having guards at the door as well as 2 guards already inside. There were a couple of couches in this room, but they were rarely used, for they rarely were delayed for long here. The guards were standing by what looked like a part of a large sphere in the middle of the far wall, which was the wall opposite the reception hall. This sphere ended in a hole, though it did not open directly onto the reception hall. It did, however, have a design that allowed anyone with their ear near the hole to hear what was going on in the room. If Nasramin called out, the guards would hear and would instantly enter the room to aid him. Other than guards in an emergency or the king and queen, no one was to use the door from this room to the reception room. From the door exiting to the rest of the palace, Hugo entered. He was wearing his finest robes in dark wine and green. Yellow was not allowed for anyone other than the king to wear to court. Father, Mother, I am proud to tell you that the Theban delegation has arrived in the hall, and they are waiting for you. Thank you, son, they said, and he bowed and left, hardly able to keep a smile off his face. They gave him enough time to comfortably return to his place in the reception hall, and then Nasramin helped her out of her chair. Her walk was pained and slow, but she had long insisted on not being wheeled into the reception hall when persons of importance were there. Instead, she hung on his arm, both of them doing their best to make it look like this was a nicety and not a necessity, and they walked to the door, which one of the guards opened for them. They maintained a stately pace, partly to keep a psychological control of the situation, partly to hide her pain. The room was fuller than usual. It was large and long, and much of the back was full of guards from both sides. No one was allowed weapons in this room, but just in case small weapons were smuggled in, or in case of some other problem, any member of a visiting delegation, whether a proper guard or not, would have 2 guards from Limos, to ensure there would never be a fight that could break out here that would not go their way. In their turn, the kings of the island, since the discovery of the tin mine and the founding of their royal line, had never used this situation to attack a visitor. Not ever, not in its entire history, no matter the provocation. A visit to the hall of the King of Limos, it was said, was as safe as a trip across one's own bedroom. As they reached the threshold, they stopped briefly so the assembled could see them. Then they angled slightly so the queen would take the first step into the room. It was tradition that the king would be the last to enter. Once he entered, no one else was allowed into the hall. Before, the queen would enter on her own and sit before the king appeared. Since that was not possible, and her pride did not allow her to be wheeled to her seat, they made this concession to the ways of the past by letting her take the first step into the room, and then having her king bring her to her throne before sitting himself. If the more conservative leaders on the island had any issues with this arrangement, they did not allow them to reach Nasramin's ears. As he always did, he focused not on the guests, but on his wife, and making sure that she got to her seat in the most dignified way possible. When she was seated, he gave her a smile no one else in the room could see, composed himself, and turned around. He faced the room directly in front of his throne. He had memorized the throne behind him and could almost see it in his mind's eye. Not only was it old, beautiful, and made nearly entirely of bronze, It had several safety features which were there to help him if there was ever trouble. The throne itself was strongly made, and its back was broad, tall, and quite thick. It was meant in part to indicate the strength of the king of Limos. Its other function was to create a barrier the king could duck behind if he was put under attack. The arms of the chair were low, so that the king in need could vault behind it easily. Also by tradition, since he was requiring his guests to be unarmed, he was unarmed, and in fact was not carrying or wearing anything easily capable of harming another human being. Thus, if he was forced to defend himself by ducking behind his own throne, it would not be considered cowardice. Not that Nasramin was incapable of defending himself. He was constantly training himself in martial skills. It was part of being a king. Everyone wanted a leader who could personally defend himself. So, if a fair fight broke out, he would not hesitate to join in. Leaping behind the throne was a tactic for, say, poisonous darts being smuggled in, as indeed had happened to his own great-grandfather, who narrowly avoided death from one dart before taking cover behind the bronze throne as his guards took down the assassin, though not before another dart ricocheted off the tall back of the throne. But that was unlikely to happen here today. He was not expecting a physical attack, even if he was prepared should it come. Looking out, he saw Hermocrates, the Theban emissary, his scribe, and the various members of his entourage, but he didn't focus on them yet. He also saw his son Shugo, clearly proud to be there. Shugo saw his father looking at him and started looking around the room as if to prove he was paying attention to everything and would be prepared for their discussion later. He saw his general Mersili, who was keeping his face impassive, and next to him was the high priest Linus, who had several under-priests just behind him. Linus's face was also unreadable. The rest of the room was mostly filled with his own guards and the remainder of Hermocrates' retainers. But front and center was Hermocrates, looking interestedly up at him, his scribe, who was already beginning to take his official notes, and two women. He did not remember them from the last visit. One was a young woman, possibly still not an adult, and the other a woman perhaps about 40. At a glance, he saw that they were both extremely well-dressed in the Theban fashion, had the same medium brown color in their hair, and that they stood perhaps just a hand's breadth closer to each other than anyone else from Thebes. He immediately understood that they were mother and daughter, and that they would have something to do with this situation. He raised his voice in greeting. "Esteemed guests, welcome to Limos. I am glad Mother Waters bore you safely to us. Your visit was unexpected, having come so soon after your last. What object do you have for your visit?" He looked at Hermocrates when he finished his sentence, for he was inviting him to speak. The Theban ambassador looked over at the older woman for a moment, then said, "We have come by special request, O Nasramin. Ptolemaeus, our king, has bade us make this journey. If I may introduce our queen, Callis, and their daughter, Theodora." The two stepped forward and gave small curtsies, the queen's very slight, but still acknowledging her situation. Nasramin nodded back at them and greeted them. "I am pleased to meet you. I, Nasramin, and my queen, Mawaya, will be happy to have you as our personal guests during your stay." "Thank you, King Nasramin," Queen Callis responded. "We are glad to be on your beautiful island. I understand you are a man to be dealt with honestly and openly." Nasramin caught a tiny motion out of the corner of his eye. Though he didn't move them from Callis, Hermocrates had not expected her to say what she was saying, and had moved unconsciously. "Please do," he agreed. "We have done our best to learn some of your traditions. We understand your eldest son, Shugo, is about old enough to go on his unity search. We would like to have Theodora be one of the young women he meets during this time, with the possibility of her becoming his bride." And that is the end of the story for this week. So, I've obviously had a ball writing this, We ended on a little bit of a bombshell, and of course there's tons more to explore about it for next time. So if you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And thank you for listening. Words and Music copyright 2021, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.